Hey guys, in today's video, I'm going to be comparing Phil Heath from 2013, Ronnie Coleman from 1999, and Dorian Yates from 1993 in a series that I will call the best of the best. This is going to be my first three-way comparison, so please let me know down below if you guys enjoyed it. That would be much appreciated. What also would be very appreciated is if you guys could take a moment to like and subscribe. I'm pushing for 1,000 subscribers, and it would really mean a lot to me if you guys did. So without any more rambling, let's get into this comparison of the best of the best. In the front double bicep shot, the person that I am immediately drawn to is Ronnie Coleman, as he has those incredibly peaky biceps, a really small midsection here in 1999, flaring lats, very good quad sweep, and huge separated quads as well, and overall his silhouette looks the best. Now, Phil Heath looks really good here too. He arguably has more separation in the arms and probably has the most separation between the biceps and the triceps. He also has the best forearms out of all these guys and arguably the best quads, but that is debatable. I mean, all three guys have phenomenal quads. And as you guys can clearly see, Phil Heath has amazing lats here. His midsection doesn't look all too bad, and overall, he creates a very good V-taper for himself. Although Dorian Yates may not be too impressive, at a glance, taking a closer look at him reveals that he has some phenomenal body parts. His lats flare out tremendously, and he creates a very good V-taper for himself. He has insanely huge forearms, and his quads appear to be the most separated from the front out of all three guys, but he doesn't have the same level of mass on those quads. He looks very impressive, but I would probably have to relegate him to third place due to his, rather lackluster arms in comparison to the other two guys. So that just leaves Phil Heath and Ronnie Coleman, and I would probably have to say that I lean slightly, just a very slight edge to Ronnie Coleman in this pose because he has the wider clavicle, the freakier, peakier biceps, and overall the larger arms, and while he may not be as dry in the arm department, he just has the freak factor that Phil Heath doesn't necessarily have. Both men have equally as impressive V-tapers, but, Ronnie Coleman has a better midsection, more aesthetic in my opinion, much smaller relative to the wide shoulders, and the quads, while Phil Heath has insane quads here, rivaling Ronnie Coleman's in terms of mass and sweep, Ronnie Coleman just has the better separated quads overall, so Ronnie Coleman will win this pose very slightly. In this front lat spread, I am extremely impressed with all three guys. Phil Heath was never known for hitting a good front lat spread, but here in 2013, he looked outstanding. But the two men that I am really impressed by would be Ronnie Coleman and Dorian Yates. Speaking of Dorian Yates presents an amazing package here with by far the best lats, but he definitely falls behind in terms of the arm department and in the quad region. Dorian Yates' quads have never been aesthetically pleasing to me. They kind of lack a bit of sweep, and his, teardrop muscle is overdeveloped relative to the rest of the quads. But that being said, he still looks great in the quad department, really ripped and separated. His midsection is flawless. His chest and shoulders look great. Now, taking a look at Ronnie Coleman is just muscle on top of muscle. His arms are just absolutely flatlining Dorian Yates's. His quads are so much better. His lats are comparable, but definitely nowhere near Dorian Yates's lats. The midsection looks flawless for Ronnie Coleman, and like I said, Dorian Yates has a great midsection here too. Now, if we take a look at Phil Heath is matching Ronnie Coleman in the arm department, and you could definitely say he's beating him because of the 3D round muscle bellies, but I will tell you that Phil Heath is narrow, and that definitely does not do him justice here. He is filling out this pose really well, and this is by far one of his best front lat spreads. 2013, a great version of him. His midsection doesn't look too bad for Phil Heath, but relative to the two other guys, he is definitely falling in last place. Between Dorian Yates and Ronnie Coleman, one could say that Ronnie Coleman absolutely flatlines Dorian Yates in terms of muscle mass and just sheer size. I mean, Ronnie Coleman has the arms and the quads, and he looks flawless, but I would say that Dorian Yates has an advantage over Ronnie Coleman purely because he looks the most balanced. He has ridiculous lats, and obviously this is a front lat spread pose, so, the man with the best lats obviously wins, and it's not like Dorian Yates is absolutely, tiny in the arm department or the quad department. His chest looks amazing, and he looks very, very grainy. Ronnie Coleman has striations everywhere, but Dorian Yates has another level of conditioning, that grainy hardness. It just looks phenomenal, and you cannot deny that Dorian Yates is filling out this pose absolutely perfectly. I mean, that is a ridiculous front lat spread from Dorian Yates. So I'm going to give, Dorian Yates a slight advantage over Ronnie Coleman. It's not like, Dorian Yates is flatlining Ronnie Coleman here, but, he definitely is winning. And Phil Heath, like I said, is going to be in third. Although all three men look amazing in their own right in the side chest pose, I am immediately drawn to Ronnie Coleman. Taking a look at him, he just has the perfect proportions everywhere. His side leg looks cut and separated. His chest is striated on both pecs, which is very rare to see. His midsection looks flawless here. And his arm, look how large his shoulder is, how good his arm looks in terms of separation. There is not a single bad thing you can say about Ronnie Coleman in the side chest. The person that will be keeping up with okay. Now, Phil Heath is the guy who's going to be keeping up with Ronnie Coleman in terms of the mass from the side. And taking a look at his side leg is absolutely massive. Now, it doesn't have the same level of detail as, let's say, Dorian Yates or Ronnie Coleman, but he has the mass. His midsection looks really good here, really tight. You can see all the details throughout those obliques and the serratus, and the abdominal muscles are peeking through there too. His chest muscles look great here. There are striations there through the far pec and through the shoulders. His arms look absolutely ludicrous here, very three-dimensional with perfect separation, and you really can't say anything bad about Phil Heath either. I mean, Ronnie Coleman and Phil Heath both have insane mass and conditioning, and it's really up to preference at the end of the day. Now, since I haven't talked about Dorian Yates, you guys might just think that I'm going to, talk trash about him. But, taking a look at him, guys, I'll be completely honest. On his own, he looks phenomenal. And personally, from a pure aesthetic standpoint, I would choose him. I mean, his chest looks amazing. He's kind of hitting this in a golden era fashion. I really like the way he's hitting this pose. His shoulder is striated, and so is his far pec. But his shoulder and the far pec seem a little bit underwhelming compared to, let's say, Phil Heath or even Ronnie Coleman. The side leg is very good, though, for Dorian Yates. A lot of detail, pretty massive, and his midsection might be the best out of all three guys. But purely because he doesn't have the same wow factor and arguably the same amount of mass in the upper body from the side, he can't really hang with, Ronnie Coleman or Phil Heath. And for that reason, I would, unfortunately, I have to say that he's going to be in third place here. Between Ronnie Coleman and Phil Heath, I would lean more towards Ronnie Coleman as I prefer his display in the chest. I like how his front pec is striated and how detailed and conditioned his far pec and shoulder look. Don't get me wrong, Phil Heath has incredible detail, but overall, I like the package that Ronnie Coleman presents. This is, like I said, really down to personal opinion and preference. Someone might prefer the way that, Phil Heath squats down a bit more and how compact he looks, but I just like Ronnie Coleman's overall flow and presentation. And I mean, both guys are equally as conditioned. This is like the top of the top, like I said. So it's very hard to choose. I'm going to give a very, very tiny edge to Ronnie Coleman, and he will get the point, and Phil Heath will place second. All right, guys. So for the side tricep pose, take a look at Ronnie Coleman from 1999. Not one of his best years for the side tricep pose. I mean, whether he's just hitting it in an off moment or this is what he presented for the side tricep, this is what we have to work with. And you can clearly see he is going to be relegated to third place. I mean, even if he was hitting this to spec, his tricep alone is nowhere near as good as Dorian Yates's or even Phil Heath's. And even though it is striated, and if we take a look at his shoulder and chest, they look amazing. His tricep is just so bad in comparison to Dorian Yates or Phil Heath that he is going to be in third place off the bat. Now, taking a look at Phil Heath, it appears that he has a very slight bit of stomach distension, which is kind of throwing off his flow a bit, but looking past that, he has a phenomenal tricep, a great bicep, and overall good conditioning in the arm. I mean, the tricep is striated for goodness sake. His forearm is ridiculous too, and his chest is really full. Not to mention, his side leg is really great here as well. Now, taking a look at Dorian Yates, I've always admired the way that he strikes this pose. I mean, he executes it to perfection. His tricep and bicep are conditioned, his shoulder is striated, his chest looks great, his midsection is definitely the best out of all three guys, And taking a look at his calves, I mean, wow. Now, the side leg is definitely massive, and of course, since this picture is all the way from 1993, the detail cannot be deciphered as easily as in a newer shot like, 2013 for Phil Heath or even 1999 for Ronnie Coleman. So there's, no need to say, but Dorian Yates definitely had absolutely outstanding conditioning in the side leg if we look at other pictures, and I'll throw one up on screen right now. As you guys can clearly see from this closer up picture of Dorian Yates, he had extremely thin skin and grainy condition, and that definitely has to count for something in the side tricep pose. Even though I've said all these positive things about Dorian Yates, and he does look phenomenal and outstanding, one of the best side tricep poses by far, I don't think he can beat Phil Heath because Phil Heath just has the better tricep overall. Phil Heath also has the better chest, arguably the better hamstring, and the better arm overall, like I said. So I don't know. I mean, I'm going to have to give this one to Phil Heath. Dorian Yates looks amazing. So does Phil Heath. Phil Heath just looks better in the tricep where it counts. And for that reason, I'm going to give this to Phil Heath. All right, guys. So in the back shots, this is where it gets extremely hard to judge these things. I mean, just taking a look at all three guys here without me saying anything, it's so hard to make up your mind. All three guys have their own unique characteristics that make them have the best backs of all time, and this is going to be a really hard one to judge. Now, Phil Heath looks absolutely outstanding. I mean, you're going to be hearing a lot of that, guys, because it's just the truth. These guys all look great. Phil Heath has that turtle shell like back. I mean, phenomenal trap development, lower back area, great lats. Now, he is a little bit narrow, but taking a look at those hamstrings, do those make up for it? Maybe. I mean, they are completely conditioned and ripped, and his glutes look really hard and striated. Overall, Phil Heath looks amazing. His conditioning is on point, but he is a little bit narrow. Ronnie Coleman has ridiculous width compared to these two guys. I mean, the only guy that could really touch him in the width here would be Dorian Yates, but, Ronnie Coleman has those three-dimensional traps as well. Ridiculous development in the lower back area. Crazy glutes, by far the best glutes out of all three guys. Just probably the best glutes of all time. Insane hamstrings, and by far just a ridiculous package for Ronnie Coleman. That's really all I can say. Now, Dorian Yates might be the most conditioned guy out of all the three guys because his glutes look ridiculously conditioned, thin skinned, and striated. His hamstrings are dug out as well. And that back is just ridiculously grainy, guys. I mean, not only is it grainy, it's wide as well. Now, this is going to be really difficult because Dorian Yates looks great here. So does Ronnie, and so does Phil. So, unfortunately, as many of you guys know, I have to put someone into third place, and that person is going to be Phil Heath, and that is solely because of his width. He lacks the width that Ronnie Coleman and Dorian Yates have, and in turn, Dorian Yates and Ronnie Coleman have the same density, thickness, and condition as, Phil Heath, and that's just unfortunate, but that is what it is, and so, Phil Heath is going to fall into third place. So now it comes down to the top two of my top 10 best backs of all time. I should have probably put a spoiler alert warning, but it is what it is. And, if you guys watched the video, you will know that Dorian Yates defeated Ronnie Coleman, having the best back of all time. But in this comparison, we are not just judging backs, we are judging everything, the whole physique. And Ronnie Coleman has some of the craziest hamstrings and glutes of all time. Dorian Yates was never really known for having the most, ridiculous glutes or hamstrings, and Ronnie Coleman is just flatlining him there, in my opinion. And for that reason, since their backs are so close, I mean, one and two of all time, I would give this to Ronnie Coleman as he presents the better overall package. Once again, three of the best backs in the rear double bicep shot. I mean, this is going to be an extremely hard pose to judge for all three guys. I mean, wow. Taking a look at Phil Heath, he displays crazy density and detail throughout that whole back. His whole back in general is just crazy, but it might be the smallest one out of these three guys. His hamstrings and glutes, once again, are absolutely outstanding, being really detailed and striated, and his arms look amazing. Now, taking a look at Dorian Yates has a crazy back in terms of detail as well, and he might be the most conditioned in the back. You can see striations through the traps, through the lower back. Every muscle is perfectly defined. Now, his arms are probably the worst out of all three guys. And his legs might also be the worst, but that is debatable between him and Phil. His glutes are clearly striated and conditioned, though, and his hamstrings are dug out as well. So this is going to be a close one. Now, Ronnie Coleman here looks insane, guys. I mean, what more can I say? His glutes are off the charts. His hamstrings are ridiculous. His back itself appears to be, the densest. It appears to have the same level of density as, let's say, Phil Heath, but, just as wide as Dorian Yates is. His arms are the best by far, having the freaky biceps, crazy triceps from behind, great shoulders. I would definitely say that Dorian Yates and, Phil Heath have very comparable shoulders and honestly might be better in terms of just sheer size relative to body than Ronnie Coleman. But, Ronnie overall, the package looks insane. Now, I hate to do this, but once again, Phil Heath is going to be in third place, as his back appears to be the smallest out of all three guys. And once again, all three guys have outstanding glutes and hamstrings, so it's not like Phil Heath brings something ridiculous to the table in that aspect. His arms might be beating Dorian's, but in my opinion, Dorian is flatlining Phil Heath in terms of the detail and those striations in the back itself. Once again, we are down between Ronnie Coleman and Dorian Yates. So, on one hand, we have sheer mass, and on the other hand, we have raw and ripped conditioning. And it's really up to preference here, as, Ronnie Coleman does have the better glutes and the better hamstrings, but it's not like Dorian Yates is shabby in that area. Now, the back itself is very close, and like I said in the rear lat spread, Dorian Yates has a better back overall, in my opinion, but here in 1999, Ronnie Coleman brought it. He has mass and detail and everything, and he might even be beating Dorian Yates here in the back department. He is definitely beating Dorian Yates in the arms, though. And for the overall package, when we take everything into account, Ronnie Coleman, of course, is going to win this pose. But in my opinion, for the back itself, I would choose Dorian as he shows the most detail and has comparable mass to Ronnie Coleman. While the abs and thigh shot isn't necessarily the best shot for any of these guys, it's, not a bad shot by any means, and all of them look rather respectable. Alright, so let's take a look at Ronnie Coleman first, and here in 1999, he doesn't look all too bad. His midsection is still relatively small, his lats flare out pretty nicely, his abdominal muscles seem to be rather aesthetically pleasing compared to like 2005 or something like that, and his quads might be the best out of all three guys. Now, Phil Heath in 2013 doesn't look all too bad here either. His midsection was never that aesthetic, but here he is keeping it together, and unfortunately, he also has the, least aesthetic midsection out of all three guys here. His quads are really good here, very comparable to Ronnie Coleman's, and his calves look amazing, his lat flare is good, and he overall creates a decent V-taper for himself. Now, taking a look at Dorian Yates, he definitely has the best V-taper here, having crazy flaring lats, a small midsection, his quads look very detailed and separated, and his calves look outstanding. I would definitely say that Dorian Yates is taking first place here, as like I said, he has the best midsection and the best V-taper. Not to mention, his quads don't look as bad, or relative to the other two guys, as bad as they did in other shots. Now, between Phil Heath and Ronnie Coleman, this really could go either way. Personally, I would choose Ronnie Coleman as he has the wider clavicle and therefore would create a better V-taper, and his quads look just a little bit more polished than Phil Heath's. Not to mention, his actual abdominal muscles look a little bit more symmetrical than Phil Heath's, and overall, Ronnie Coleman seems to flow just a little bit better in terms of the midsection, which is kind of crazy to say, but it is what it is. Dorian Yates is going to place first, Ronnie Coleman second, and Phil Heath third. Like in the side tricep pose, I'm going to immediately relegate Dorian Yates to third place, and that is for the simple reason that the most muscular shot was not really a mandatory shot in 1993, nor was it a mandatory shot in 1999. However, Ronnie Coleman obviously looks really good, so I'm not going to put him to the side. Speaking of the most muscular and Dorian Yates, though, I'm sure he would have mastered this pose if it was a mandatory in 1993, as he did with all the other shots. Just here, he seems a little unnatural and isn't hitting this pose properly, in my opinion. So even if it was being judged fairly, he would still be in third place. Now, taking a look at Ronnie Coleman, he has always looked good in the most muscular. I mean, even up until his last Mr. Olympia, where he was falling apart, his most muscular looked amazing. And here in 1999, he is no exception. His arms are perfectly conditioned, his shoulders are strided, his chest, everything looks on point. His midsection doesn't look all too bad. He's not flexing his quads all too much, but come on. We all know he definitely has the best quads, or very close with Phil. Now, he looks great in his own right, Ronnie Coleman, but let's take a look at Phil Heath. Phil Heath just appears to have density on density, mass, and just thickness everywhere. His legs look crazy. He's flexing them here. His midsection looks really good. His chest and shoulders are ridiculous, guys. And his arms might even be beating Ronnie Coleman's. Now, I will tell you, I think, Phil Heath definitely is beating Ronnie Coleman. Ronnie Coleman, one of his best shots, the most muscular, but Phil Heath, those 3D muscle bellies on him, you cannot beat that. He looks absolutely ridiculous. Some of the best arms of all time, some of the best shoulders, one of the best chests. I mean, really good stuff for Phil Heath. And for that reason, Phil Heath is going to be taking this most muscular. Ronnie will be placing second, and Dorian will be placing in a distant third. So as you guys can see on screen, here are the results of this comparison. I'm actually going to tally up the points, and the way that will work is first place will get 1 point, second place will get 2 points, and third place will get 3 points. The person with the least amount of points in the end will be the overall winner, so let's go to that now. So Phil Heath had a total of 18 points, putting him in third place. Ronnie Coleman had a total of 13 points, putting him in first place. And Dorian Yates had 17 points, putting him in second place. So if you guys enjoyed this comparison, please let me know down below. Like and subscribe. Please remember to do that as it means a lot to me. And thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.